All right, so here are a couple examples to kind of show you how this works. And so we remember that this is true, right? If we have if we have a perfect square binomial, or a binomial squared, I should say, then this is what the perfect square trinomial will look like, right? Where this middle term is 2p, right? If this is p, and our c term, our linear term, or excuse me, our constant term is the square of p right here, right? Okay, and that's just what happens when you FOIL. So remember that the relationship is p is b over 2. So first of all, we can check to see, is this a perfect square? So we can first find p by just taking b and dividing it in half, right? So p is 4. All right. So to see if it's a perfect square trinomial, we want to ask ourselves, does 4 squared equal 16, right? Or in other words, does p squared equal c, right? That's what we're looking for. Okay. And it turns out that it does, right? 4 squared is obviously 16. So that's the relationship that you always have to look for these. And this is if a is equal to 1. It's a little different if a is bigger than 1. So that means this is a perfect square. So I can factor this, right? So I can turn this into, I could just put an x here. Since this is a minus, that's going to make this a minus. Okay, so this sign just tells you exactly what this sign is going to be. And then here we're going to put in p, which is 4, right? Okay. All right, and then of course we just put the squared, the perfect square trinomial, and then we'll put the equals 1. So notice we're not setting one side equal to 0 in this case. This is a little different when we complete the square. Now, if you want to double check, you can FOIL this out and you'll get to this, right? Because if I FOIL it, I'll get x squared minus 4x minus 4x, which will turn into negative 8x, and then negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So you'll definitely get this if you FOIL. All right, so now here's where the square root property comes in, because now I have this squared equals 1, right? So what I can do is I can take the square root of both sides. I'll put the plus or minus there, right? So what happens is the square root and the square cancel out. So now I have x minus 4 equals, the square root of 1 is just 1, so it's going to be plus or minus 1. All right. So now we have basically a linear equation that we can easily solve. Now we're going to do this. Well, let's see. Let's get x by itself, and then we'll talk about the plus or the minus. So we're going to add 4 to both sides, and so we'll get x equals, and then you can do plus or minus 4, plus or minus 1 plus 4. You can do 4 plus or minus 1, right? Now we can simplify this more, right? That actually comes out to 2 different answers. It comes out to 4 plus 1, right? Which is 5, so that's one of our answers, x equals 5. And then our other answer is going to be 4 minus 1, which is 3. So 5 and 3 are 2 values for x that make this equation true. All right, so that's how we solve by completing the square. Okay, let's try this next one, and we'll go run through it a little faster. So first I'm going to check, is this a perfect square? So I'm going to find p. So remember, p is half of b. So since b is 16, p is going to be 8, right? You can do this mentally. Then we just want to ask ourselves, if we square this, do we get to c, right? So does 8 squared equal 64? And yeah, it does, right? And so that means this is a perfect square. So that means I can put this in this format. I can put an x here, right? And then I'm going to put p in the second spot. And then remember, this sign comes right here, right? So always use the sign in front of b, right? This one's always should be positive. If this is not positive, it can't be a perfect square, quadratic, or trinomial. Okay, so make sure that's positive. All right, and then this is the sign that tells us what this is. So we put that in there, equals 15. So now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So we get plus or minus. The square and the square root cancel out, so we get x plus 8 equals plus or minus. This time, root 15 is not a perfect square, right? And there are no values that go into 15 that can that double up, right? We don't have any pairs that can come out. We just have singles, and so we can't simplify square root of 15. So we just leave it like that. So now I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And so I get x equals, and you can do this, you can put the plus or minus after like we did before, or you can put it before. We'll just do it before this time. Okay. And so this time we cannot simplify this. Okay. So you can actually leave this as it is, but just know that it's two different answers. Okay. So it's two different answers. So one answer would be positive root 15 minus 8, right? And the other answer would be negative root 15 minus 8. And it's okay if you put these the other way. If you want to do negative 8 plus root 15, that's okay. Or negative 8 minus root 15. Either one is, any of these are okay. But just know that when you have a plus or minus, that means you have two different answers, right? Now, let's say the direction said round to the nearest tenth, which there are, I think, in the book, there is a section that says that. So then you would plug this into your calculator, root 15, and you would get a decimal approximation. Let's say round to the nearest hundredth, actually, is what it says in the book. So plug that in your calculator, square root 15, and the square root is second, and then the x squared button. Okay, so if we were doing that, then we would get x equals plus or minus 3.87 to the nearest hundredth, right? And let's do this approximately, okay? And then minus 8. So now we can actually simplify that, right? So we can do 3.87 minus 8, so positive 3.87. And that comes out to 4.13. Okay, or we can do negative 3.87 minus 8, which comes out to negative 11.87. All right, so if I said round to the nearest tenth, then, or excuse me, round to the nearest hundredth, then this would be our answer. If I didn't say to round, then assume that we want things exact and simplified, which would be this value here, okay? And remember, there's two answers there, but you can just write it like this, but just know that it's two answers.